Okay, welcome to another vintage fishing reel service and repair video. In this episode, we're going to be working on a Wright McGill. That says Fre-Line. Some people interpret that as one line, but it's actually an F. Wright McGill Fre-Line model 10-BC. And this is a reel that was acquired by Wright McGill, so that originally was not a part of Wright McGill. The earlier ones just said Fre-Line, and they didn't have these little rings in the sort of whitish paint down inside there. They didn't have these engraved rings there. And didn't say Wright McGill. The later ones did say Wright McGill, but also said Boulder, Colorado. This one says Denver, Colorado, but I don't think it's one of the latest ones. I can't remember what additions were made right now that made it one of the later ones, but I think this is probably, mid-50s. I think 1951 was when it was first introduced. I think this one might be mid to late 50s. So this one's an interesting reel in that you have many options of how you want to use it. First thing that makes it interesting is that the line comes out the side. So it's mounted on the reel like this. The line comes out the side, which is interesting because you have a lot of bends in the line. You'd think there'd be a lot of drag on the line in terms of ease of casting, because the line has to bend from the spool back to the hole and then make another bend towards the direction of your line guides. But you can use this like a Spincast reel, so you can mount it on the top of your rod like that, and of course you can have the crank on either side. So if you want to have a right hand retrieve or left hand retrieve, you can also mount the reel on the bottom of your rod and use it more like a spinning reel. Again, you can move that to whichever side you want the handle on. And you can use it on a Spincast rod, you can use it on a spinning rod, and you can use it on a fly rod. And let's say you're going to use it in the spin casting mode, where it's on the top of the rod. Apparently you hold your thumb or finger over the line. After to release the line, you would turn the handle back, and then you'd have to hold the line while you cast. So you can do that with your thumb or finger, and then let go as you cast. I imagine if you're using it as a spinning rod, the best way to do it would be to just grab the line around the rod with your finger like you would with a spinning reel. This reel is very similar to the Johnson sidewinders. Here is a Johnson Model 20 that probably dates around the same period of time. And from my understanding, pretty much all of the different ways in which you can use this one in terms of versatility of different rods, running it as a spin cast setup or running it underneath the rod and sort of a spinning setup, the ability to change whether it's left-handed or right-handed. I think all of those things you can do with the Johnson sidewinders. There's a number of different models of these. This one, if you notice this here nut on the or cap on the handle, that's not factory. It was missing that cap, and I found this thingy at the hardware store, and it works for the purpose that I needed it to do. And so that piece is not factory, obviously, but very similar in function and versatility. The Fre-Line is with the Johnson sidewinders. But in order to change those, different configurations, and change the direction with which you wind, you've got to change the something in the in this apparatus here in the cover, which I'll show you when I take it apart. These came with a number of different crank knobs. Some of them were blue, some of them were black. There may have been some other colors, but it doesn't really have an anti-reverse or, so far as I know, any kind of drag. So this cover comes off. It's just simply pressure fitted in there, and so if it's nice and clean and so on, you might be able to take it and sort of like removing the lid off a dip can or something, some tobacco can. But this one's a little crusty, so I'm going to have to coax this with a screwdriver to get it off, and that's what we'll do to start, and then we'll service that. Okay, so we're going to and by the way, when you do configure this one way or the other, if you're going to configure it for spin casting, you're going to put the cover back on so that that hole is on the bottom. That's the drain hole. If you're going to use it for spinning reel, you put the cover back on so the drain hole faces down, because that's the drain hole. So we'll start by coaxing this cap off here. I'm trying not to scratch it too bad, at least where it can be seen, because I can hear sand gritting in there right now, which is why it's coming off so hard. I can hear the grit in there. Hopefully when we put that together, we get that cleaned off and maybe put a little bit of some kind of lubricant on there so that you don't have to gouge it with a screwdriver to get it off. But you can see there's all kinds of lake dirt in there that needs to be cleaned off, and of course that wouldn't necessarily affect the thing coming off. It's here and on the outside of here that you need to get cleaned off so that cover comes on and off a little bit better. So this the spool is basically part of the body. The spinner head does come off, and this is where you'll find the apparatus that allows you to change the direction that you crank. And of course, if you have line on there, anytime you change the direction which you're winding or cranking, you're going to have to either change line altogether or pull out the line and wind it in the other direction, or you're going to have a mess. But in this spinner head, there's this plastic tension ring, and if you pull that out, you're going to want to be careful, because that's old plastic, and we don't really want to break that. And so you kind of want to bend it in the middle to get it to pop out. And then you take off the brass tension washer here. So this is the plastic tension washer, and here's the brass one. And then you flip this thing around to change the direction that you want to wind. Now I want this to be set up for spinning, which it is, and I want it set up so that you crank with the left hand. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to try to remember where that is while I clean some of these parts, because I want that set up for left hand retrieve for spinning. So I'm going to set these aside in laying just like that, so that I know exactly where that goes back in to keep it in the configuration that it's in. There really isn't much to do here. Again, the spool is basically part of the body. This piece is pressed on around here. So the only thing you really need to do there is clean that all up. Clean all this grit out of there and buff that out, and clean this and grease and lubricate that and so on. So the main mechanical features are inside this. Now Full disclosure, this only had one screw in it when I got it, and it was all rusty. So there was a missing screw. So I've already been to the hardware store and gotten some new screws, some stainless screws. So these aren't original, but they work, and they work better than what was on there. So I'm going to pull those out so that we can access the gears. And so that's all there is. There's no drag or anything. It's basically a main gear and a pinion gear and a bunch of dried up grease in there. So this only goes on one way. Basically the main gear goes over this post here, and then you line up the holes with the threaded posts here and put the screws in. So the only thing you really have to do here, I'm going to pull this handle nut off, and that should allow me to take the main gear out. There is a washer. Is that a no, it's a bushing. Looks like that's pressed on there, but at least we can clean out that bushing. It was winding a little rough. I mean, it was a little tight, and cleaning out all that dried up grease in the bushing and on that main gear shaft is going to make that wind much more smoothly. So and then just clean out here. I don't think it's probably a particularly good idea to take off the pinion gear and pinion gear shaft. A lot of that looks like it's pressed on. So I'm just going to try to get some penetrant underneath there and in that journal and get that lubricated good. But there really isn't much more to do in terms of disassembly at this point. So I'm going to take these parts to the sink and scrub them thoroughly and get all this grease off of there, and I'll be back just like that. Okay. Dry off some of these, or all of these parts. Got that nasty price tag thing off of there. Cleaned out all the lake scum out of that. Cleaned up all the dried grease on this. Still seeing a little scum down in there, but that seems to be coming off with the paper towel. Get a screwdriver in there and get down in the corners, because that will affect how easily that cover will go on there if that's not nice and clean down in there. And I went out to the wire wheel and polished up that handle nut too. Okay, so here's the, this thing's what moves the pickup pin in and out. So, get that dried out a little bit better. And put a little oil underneath that. Let that gravitate down in there. And remembering that that went on that way. And then this went on there like that. That notch fitting over this tab here. And then I'm going to put this on the same way I had it, because you can see there's a bend here. That's the way it's been being bent up to get that out of there. You don't want to put it in that way and start bending it up the other way. Then you start creating a crease and maybe break that, and I just hope I don't break it putting it on here. I'm not sure that it really matters where that straight edge is. I think that's just there to help you get a finger on it to get it out. Of course, you can always slide it around anyway, but so there, that goes back in like that. And just to check, let's see. Well, I guess I'll have to wait, put it back together to make sure that it's back on the way I wanted it for underspin left-hand retrieve. Alright, I'm going to take my steel wool and clean up this. There's definitely some residual dried grease on this main gear shaft. So I want to polish that up really nice. So I've gone and made sure I cleaned out that journal really well with WD-40 and a cotton swab. But I also have the opportunity here, seeing how it's so short, to just get in there with some steel wool and clean that out the best I can. That's going to make for a really nice, smooth retrieve. I don't see any residual grease in there. I don't think. No. So that goes back in there like that, but before we do that, just double check and make sure I don't see any residual grease in the teeth. No missing or damaged teeth. And then we gotta oil that. And then we can go ahead and put our handle on, but I'm gonna get this nastiness off with some steel wool there. Some of that's just scarring. And then we can put our crank handle nut back on. And while we're thinking about it, get some oil down in these posts here for our crank knobs and work that down in. And you should see it come out at the bottom and get real dirty. Much more smooth than it was before. Wait a minute. No, there was not a washer in there, it's just that bushing. And now I want to try to sneak some oil down underneath. You can't really access the axle shaft there, but hopefully we can sneak some oil down in there. And then grease these two gears. These gears had almost no grease on them, really, quite frankly. I don't know, but even no really even hardly any dried grease on them. So it definitely needed lubricating. All right, now a little bit of oil on this post here, around which the main gear rides. Work that in. And then we can button this end up. All right, now we ought to be able to put this on and make sure that it's winding and releasing in the proper direction. And so this tab, you don't want to have that tab over that. You want to have it such that it gets picked up by one of these slots. So I'm just going to put it on where the tab is about right where that slot's going to pick it up. And I better oil that. And I'm going to just finger tighten this nut down. So I'm going to be holding it like this, and that's winding forward. No, I got it on backwards. So right now, when I wind this way, the pickup pin is released, and when I wind backwards, it's coming out. So I must have somehow reversed something in there when I was monkeying around with it. So let's flip that around. Alright, so now when I wind this direction, you can see the pickup pin is out. So I've got the reel under the rod and the pickup pin is out. Now when I wind backwards, the pickup pin is retracted for casting. So all that, trying to keep that thing the way I found it, and of course it may not have been right in the first place. That's quite a possibility. It's really hard to know until you take the cover off to see which way. You can't feel really whether the pin's in or out by doing that. You have to basically open up the cap and look in there. You know, I hesitate to really put oil on this to make this cover come on and off easier, because that's going to attract dirt and make it even harder. So I'm hoping that just the cleaning will make that a little bit easier. But seeing how I'm going to run this with the reel under the rod, I'm going to make sure that that drain hole is down and the logo reads that way. Definitely is fitting in there a lot easier, but you know, you're going to have to fiddle with it to pull it off by hand without using a screwdriver for help. But I got the drain hole facing down. The reel has been set up appropriately for left-hand retrieve under rod. I'm hearing a little bit. You hear that? I'm thinking that plastic from the spinner head is rubbing against the spool, and I don't like that. So I'm going to winkle this thing back out of there again and see about greasing that. Part of it probably is that bend that's been made right there, getting this thing on and off. That's probably rubbing against that, but it's probably supposed to, because there's a tension washer there. But see if we can quiet it down here. It's a lot better than it was. But it's still a little noisier than I'd like. All right. Okay, so it's working much more smoothly and quietly now. But I don't know if you can hear that. But about every turn you hear just a little bit of a scrape. And I don't hear that. I mean, I hear some clankety clank, but I don't hear that little scrape when I turn it back, which means that the pickup pin is retracted. But when I move forward, pickup pin is out, I'm hearing a little bit of scrape. And I'm just wondering if that little dent there is just enough of a dent where it's hitting that. So maybe not, but I think what I'm going to do is pop this cover off again and pop that dent out and see if that quiets that down a little bit. I think that's much better. So let's just see if we can get rid of that clicking sound. Nope. Nope, I'm still hearing it, so I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that dent. It must just be something. I mean, it's not really affecting the smoothness of operation. It's just annoying little rubbing. It must be something to do with that plastic cover in there on the spinner head, just rubbing up against the spool, and probably not something that really affects anything other than just I don't like it. Thanks for watching.